Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. The familiar hum of the console greeted me as I stepped through the door, my sanctuary from the high-pressure world of software sales. Flipping my tie over my shoulder, I plopped down on the couch, ready to dive into Racing 3, my current obsession. The thrill of the race, the roar of the engines, it was my escape, a world where I was more than just another cog in the machine. I loved it. But today, something was off. The screen glowed with the game's main menu, yet I hadn't even touched the controller. "That's odd," I muttered, brow furrowing. The icon indicated a game in progress, and my leaderboard ranking had plummeted. My virtual currency, meticulously earned from countless hours of play, had dwindled. "Heather?" I called out, expecting to find my wife upstairs. The house echoed back in silence, she wasn't home yet. As I scrolled through the game logs, a name I didn't recognize kept popping up, NateRacer88. Who was this guy, and how was he logging into my account? A sudden burst of laughter startled me, coming from the guest room. My heart pounded as I approached, the door slightly ajar. Inside, a young man, barely in his 20s, was sprawled on the guest bed, controller in hand, deeply engrossed in Racing 3. "Hey! Who are you?" I demanded, snatching the controller from his hands. He looked up, startled, his eyes wide. "I'm Nate. Heather didn't tell you I'd be here?" His casual demeanor stung, as if he belonged. "Heather? My wife, Heather?" I couldn't mask the incredulity in my voice. "Yeah, man, she said I could crash here for a few days. Said something about helping me out, you know." He smirked, an edge of insolence in his tone that set my teeth on edge. The pieces clicked, a betrayal so blatant, yet I was blindsided. "Helping you out how, exactly?" I pressed, my voice a dangerous calm. Nate shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I didn't think she'd want me telling you, but we've been seeing each other." The room spun as his words landed like punches. Betrayed by my wife, for a fling with a kid who just wanted to play my console. I took a deep breath, my mind racing faster than any game. "Get out," I hissed, the anger clear in my eyes. Nate gathered his things quickly, the smirk wiped from his face. The door slammed behind him, leaving a silence that thundered. Alone, the gravity of the revelation sunk in. Heather's late nights, the unexplained absences, it all made sense now. But why? Was I merely a convenience, a stable backdrop to her secret life? No, this wouldn't stand. My hands trembled, not with fear but with a cold, seething rage. This betrayal wouldn't go unanswered. Heather had destroyed our marriage for a fling. I would ensure she regretted her decision profoundly. I sat back down, the controller cold in my hands. It wasn't just a game anymore, it was a symbol of everything I had lost, and everything I was about to reclaim. The screen blurred before me, Racing 3 waiting to resume. But first, I had a real-life race to win. A race for justice. My plan was simple: expose her, divorce her, and ensure she lost more than just a husband. She would lose everything. As the console beeped, awaiting my next move, I realized the game was far from over. It had just begun. The glow of the laptop cast shadows across my face as I pored over Heather's social media and emails. With her login saved from a time of trust, I had access to every lie, every digital footprint of her deceit. Each message between her and Nate twisted the knife deeper, their flippant words painting a clear picture of their disregard for me. But anger was a potent fuel, and my plan for retribution became clearer with every click. I printed every incriminating conversation, stacking them into a neat folder on my desk. "Proof," I murmured to myself, a grim smile tugging at my lips. With evidence in hand, I wasn't just a scorned husband, I was a man with leverage. The sound of the front door creaking open broke my concentration. Heather called out, "Honey, I'm home." Her voice, once a sweet melody, now grated on my nerves. I steeled myself, tucking the folder under my arm as I went to meet her. She paused mid-step as she saw my expression, her smile faltering. "What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes darting nervously. "We need to talk," I said, my tone leaving no room for escape. I led her to the living room, gesturing for her to sit. As she perched on the edge of the couch, I remained standing, folder in hand, the physical barrier between us as palpable as the emotional one. Heather wrung her hands, her usual confidence wavering. "Talk about what, exactly?" I threw the folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a slap that made her jump. "About Nate. About your betrayal." I watched as her face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock. "That's private." "How could you?" "Private?" I cut her off, my voice sharp as a blade. "What about our marriage, Heather? Was that just a game to you?" I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. She opened her mouth, then closed it, lost for words, her usual composure shattered. I didn't mean for it to go this far," she stammered, her voice a whisper. "But it did, Heather. And now, there are consequences." I leaned in, my voice a cold whisper. "I want a divorce. And I want you out of this house by tomorrow." Her eyes filled with tears, her facade crumbling. "Please, can we talk about this?" "I'm sorry, I truly am." "Sorry doesn't change what you did." I stood firm, the folder now a testament to her betrayal. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. Everything is in motion. You can't stop it." She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "What about us? What about all the years we've shared? They meant something to me, but clearly, they didn't to you." I turned away, unable to bear the sight of her breakdown. "You should pack your things." Leaving Heather in a heap of remorse, I retreated to my office, locking the door behind me. My heart pounded, not just with sorrow but with the adrenaline of a man who had taken control of his destiny. As I sat back down, the screen of my laptop welcomed me back, a digital battlefield awaiting my next command. Tonight, I had set the first piece in motion. But the game was far from over. There were more moves to make, more strategies to employ. Heather had made her play, and now it was my turn. I would ensure that when the final checkmate came, it would leave no doubt of her defeat. The intrigue of betrayal had been met with the cold clarity of revenge. Now, it was a waiting game, and I was patient, a patient hunter watching as his trap was sprung. The morning light crept through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor as I paced the room. Each step was measured, the rhythm a counter to the chaotic racing of my thoughts. Today was the day Heather would leave, the house echoing the emptiness of a shattered marriage. I had spent the night reviewing every legal document, every message once more, fortifying my resolve like armor against any second thoughts. I heard her before I saw her, the soft tread of her footsteps hesitating outside the office door. The click of the handle was soft, tentative. "Michael?" Her voice was a strained whisper, the remnants of last night's tears still evident. I didn't turn to face her. "Everything is on the dining table. Your copy of the divorce papers, the contact for the moving company, and the lease agreement for the apartment I arranged for you." My voice was steady, detached. She stepped in, her presence filling the space with a tension that buzzed like static. "You've arranged an apartment for me?" Her surprise was tinged with a mix of relief and sorrow. "It's paid up for the next 3 months. I think that's more than generous, all things considered." I finally turned to look at her, meeting her gaze squarely. The woman I had loved was still there, somewhere beneath the layers of deceit. "Michael, thank you. I don't deserve your kindness after everything." Her voice broke, a fragile sound in the starkness of the room. "This isn't about kindness, Heather. It's about closure. I need you to sign the papers before you leave. I handed her a pen, the gesture final. She nodded, taking the pen with a shaky hand. The silence that followed was filled with the scratch of pen on paper, each stroke a nail in the coffin of our shared past. She handed back the signed documents, her hand brushing mine, a fleeting touch that spoke of 1,000 memories. I suppose this is goodbye then. Her voice was almost a whisper, a stark contrast to the woman who had once filled our home with laughter. It is. I kept my response short, guarding the remnants of my broken heart. As she turned to leave, I added, Heather, one more thing. She paused, looking back with a mix of hope and fear. I want you to know that I loved you. Truly. But I can't forgive this. I know, she replied, a single tear trailing down her cheek. Goodbye, Michael. With that, she walked out, her steps slow and measured, each one echoing in the empty house like a fading heartbeat. As the door clicked shut, I sank into a chair, the adrenaline that had fueled me draining away, leaving behind a hollow victory. I had won, if one could call the dissolution of a once happy life winning. But the battle wasn't truly over. There were still accounts to settle, not with Heather, but with Nate. The young man who had entered my home under the guise of friendship and used it as a stage for betrayal. My laptop hummed to life as I began to search for him. Information was power, and I intended to use it to ensure that Nate would never forget the price of betrayal. I was no longer just a betrayed husband, I was an avenger, carving justice out of the wreckage of deceit. As I plotted my next move, I knew this chapter of my life would soon close. But until then, I would ensure that every action, every decision, echoed the consequence of their choices. The game had changed, and I was holding all the cards. The city buzzed around me as I walked the crowded streets, the noise a dull roar against my focused thoughts. My steps led me to a familiar place, a cafe where Nate liked to boast about his conquests online. Today, I would end it, once and for all. Inside, the cafe was bustling with the late afternoon rush, people engrossed in their laptops and conversations. I spotted Nate at a corner table, his laughter reaching me before I fully saw him. He was regaling a friend with stories, oblivious to the storm approaching him. I approached, my heart pounding with a cold, deliberate rage. Nate, I called out, my voice cutting through the chatter, turning heads. Nate looked up, his smile fading as he recognized me. Michael, what are? We need to talk. Now. I didn't raise my voice, but my tone left no room for argument. I nodded towards the door, and he followed, sensing the seriousness of the situation. Once outside, I steered him into an alley beside the cafe, away from prying eyes. You thought you could just use my life for your games? I hissed, my face inches from his. Look, Michael, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't think. You're right, you didn't think. You never thought about the consequences, about the people you hurt. But you will now. The steel in my voice was unyielding. What do you want from me? Nate's voice cracked, his usual bravado crumbling under the weight of my gaze. I want you to disappear. You will leave this city tonight. If you ever come back or contact Heather again, the evidence of your affair and all the sordid details will go public. Your friends, your family, everyone will know what you really are. I threw an envelope at his feet. It contained fake documents and photos, enough to convince him I could ruin his life. Nate's face paled as he picked up the envelope, his hands trembling. You're crazy, he muttered, but the fear in his eyes told me he believed every word. No, Nate. I'm just thorough. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. I know it was you who crashed my game rankings. Consider this my final move. Game over, Nate. I left him there, standing alone, the weight of his actions finally dawning on him. Later that evening, as I sat in the quiet of my now empty house, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Heather standing there, her eyes red-rimmed, a suitcase by her side. Michael, I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know you are. But it's too late. I replied, the finality in my voice mirroring the emptiness in my heart. Where will you go? It was all I could muster. Away from here. Away from the memories and the pain. She picked up her suitcase, her stance resigned. Goodbye, Heather. I closed the door softly behind her, sealing away the past. As I turned back to the emptiness of the house, a sense of peace settled over me. The revenge was complete, the betrayal avenged, and yet, the victory was bittersweet. The game had been played, with both sides losing more than they had bargained for. But in the end, I had kept my integrity, refusing to let deceit and betrayal define me. I would start anew, rebuild, and perhaps, one day, trust again. For now, the final turn had been made, and the game had truly ended.